to have you join me tonight for the Decluttering Battle Plan. This is a straightforward strategy that I have helped dozens of my clients employ as they get ready to sell their homes, but it is a great all-purpose strategy for anyone who needs to conquer clutter in their personal environment. So let's get started. There I am on a better hair day, a day when I wasn't trying to fight the humidity of Toronto weather. I am a realtor who works in the suburbs of Toronto. Predominantly, my business is built around helping homeowners who are just that little bit older, perhaps retired or about to retire, and they're interested in downsizing. So they're empty nesters, they have more space than they need, and we help them with custom-made solutions that are going to put them in a living option that is going to suit their long-term well-being, lifestyle, and financial needs. So I started S.M.A.R.T Realty Solutions as a Keller Williams agent about 7 years ago. I left the teaching field and went into real estate, and I realized as I was knocking on doors in my neighborhood that there were a lot of people who had recurring issues. So a lot of older homeowners, they didn't know how to deal with the amount of things that they had accumulated. They weren't sure what their next home would possibly be. And so I just developed an entire program geared towards meeting their needs. Part of meeting the community needs around me has also been a practice right from the beginning to be giving back to the community. So our workshops are always no cost, no obligation. People come out to them. And of course, during COVID, we had to digitize all of our offerings. And so that's how we came up with our webinar series as well. We support Chats, that's our charity of choice. We raise funds for them twice a year through what we call our community paper shredding and Chats fundraising event, where people can bring their paper clutter to be securely shredded on site, and we raise money for Chats. We've raised thousands of dollars so far, so I'm super proud of that initiative. So let's get going on tonight's program. We're going to be having introductions, which I've just dealt with, and really knowing our enemy, that is clutter. We want to identify the high cost, just as a way of motivating ourselves to move past it, to get out of that state of almost like suspended animation where we are frozen or paralyzed by the amount of stuff we have to deal with. And part of that is going to be debunking the myths that we tell ourselves about the stuff that we have, the surplus stuff, and the stories we tell ourselves. I also want to take you through our strategy. This is our system of 5 steps to help you with the decluttering process. And I developed this as a realtor, as someone who really wanted to help my clients. But it doesn't matter what age and stage you're in, this is going to be something that you can benefit by. Predominantly, as I mentioned, as a realtor, I developed this because I know that decluttering homes is one of the most important things that people can do in order to work towards a successful sale. And then we'll have an option at the end for special events and some offers. So I would say that downsizers are very often stymied by the amount of stuff they have in their home. They are blocked. They would want to be in a different kind of living arrangement, but they just feel overwhelmed. They end up having to put it off. They feel like they have to put it off, and it's the enemy that holds them prisoner in a home that no longer suits their need. So they go from someday I'll deal with this, and it just gradually gets pushed further and further into the future. Well, because there's a lot of potential fear based of getting rid of things. There's a lot of psychological attachments that we have to stuff frequently. So we want to make sure that we're dealing with that piece of the puzzle as well. So as we look to our enemy, our clutter enemy, I just really want you to think of what clutter costs you in terms of your social life, your downtime, your cash flow, the unusable space that you have in your home. And this one really resonates with me, is clutter stealing time. When you can't find things, when you are frustrated by not being able to locate your keys or your glasses because your home is filled with too many other things taking up your attention. But I also think of the social impact of being in a cluttered environment where people don't feel like their home is a safe haven anymore. They can't relax, or maybe they even have some debt issues because they have been really over purchasing over time. So when we think of time being stolen, I know the average person, it says, is losing a year of their life looking for misplaced, lost, duplicate items. And when we do buy those duplicates, we waste the time. We waste the time of going to the store. We waste the money spending it on things that we already have. We know it's somewhere. We just can't locate it. And oftentimes, the thing that we had that we can't find is better quality. We just go out and go to the dollar store and find a cheap replica. So we're losing a real quality of life with having too much clutter in our homes. So this cartoon really occurred to me as something quite funny, that we are always looking for things, and this poor guy's situation, he has to find another decluttering book because he can't find the other two that he borrowed. So I think we can all relate on some level. Now, the other thing as a realtor I'm very aware of is the financial cost of holding on to surplus belongings, just in terms of using our homes as a storage facility for those things. So if you look at your home, if you're like most of my clients, you're probably using 3 or 4 rooms out of the total house. So that's likely the kitchen, the family room, the master bedroom or the primary bedroom, and then maybe another room on occasion. Maybe that's the laundry room or some other place like that. But the majority of the home is not being used. It's being really just as a warehouse for your stuff. And if you think of the percentage of your home that you live in versus the rest that is dedicated to holding your clutter, it's really an astronomical number. It's really interesting. The self-storage here is out of date. This is from 2012. And I had a startling revelation looking up for more current statistics, that this industry of self-storage is so vast, so financially important. It's actually the leading growth industry in the US is in terms of real estate. So it takes up more real estate than all of the McDonald's, Starbucks, Wendy's, Arby's, and one other place combined. That's how much retail space is dedicated to the storage industry. And it's billions and billions of dollars a year. And about 10% of Americans have a storage locker or outside of their home. So this is costly on that front too. Those storage units are extremely expensive. So from both sides of the story, either in your own home or in paying for rented accommodations, this is a very costly issue. So this actually came from the Toronto Real Estate Board in May here. And the difference between property types, if you could see your way clear to downsizing to a different property category by going to a detached home, from a detached home to a semi-detached or a townhouse or a condo apartment. Now, these are just averages, but the average savings could be anywhere from $300,000 to $750,000 more. So that's a really significant financial impetus, motivation to think about going to a smaller property and getting rid of that stuff, holding on to the things that you love and that you use and that bring you joy, and getting rid of the rest. It sounds like a great idea, but obviously, you know, we all would like our home to be a sanctuary and not a storage unit. If COVID has taught us anything, it's that these homes are not really the source of our happiness and satisfaction. Many of us felt like we were imprisoned by them. And now what really brings us joy isn't the size of our homes, but the size of our lives outside this home. So more stuff is more things to take care of. And we all need a bit of freedom as we move on through life. So that's the purpose here. So why don't we declutter? This to me was a thunderbolt. You know, decluttering or clutter is really the sign of unmade decisions. Everything that you own, whether it's a pen or 45 pens, if you've got them and they're cluttering up your space, it's really that you have deferred making a decision about them. So we get overwhelmed by the decision-making process and we just push it off. So we are procrastinating is really the essential, the core issue of clutter. Clutter isn't a storage issue. It's not even an organization issue. It truly is a procrastination issue. So I'm going to help you with some strategies to overcome that reluctance to get started. But we are telling ourselves every day stories about our stuff. And I think they tend to fall into two general camps. They are the stories that have an emotional origin, things like having a sentimental attachment to things. I am so guilty of this. I put my hand up, I put two hands up, that keeping mementos of my children's childhood era, now that they're grown up, those things to me are so reminiscent of such a lovely time in my life. I don't want to get rid of them. But on the other hand, I realize that if they're sitting in a storage box in the basement that I never actually look at, there isn't really much going on in terms of those fond memories. So I would say that you don't have to get rid of those. Nobody is going to give you an order that you have to completely get rid of those sentimental things, but just to limit them, to maybe keep the very best examples of your child's report cards or handicrafts or whatever it was. Just keep a few of those things and take photographs of the rest. And we have so many fantastic online programs where you can take cell phones and turn them into actually books. And that's not a high cost item, but that's a great way of documenting. Because some of us, we collect things as a way of almost being the family historian. So if that's your role, or you have a sentimental attachment, take a picture, keep a small amount and get rid of the rest. The other thing that people say to me all the time is that they're keeping it for family. Oh, well, I can't get rid of that cedar chest, that's for my granddaughter. Or those grandpa's tools, I'm giving those to, you know, my niece, she's getting into woodworking. And I think, okay, there's three questions I want to ask about that, because everybody says, well, I'm keeping it for family. But number one, do they know that you have it intended for them? Or is this kind of a secret that you are keeping from them? Not maybe intentionally, but just you haven't mentioned it. So bring it up, have that conversation. The next thing is you have to ask if they want it. This happened to me when my daughter came back from university. You know, they move out, you think they're gone, then they move back. And I had the cradle that all of the babies were sleeping in beside our bed when they were tiny newborns. And I was keeping it. I thought one of the kids will have kids and I'm going to want to give it to them. And unanimously, they all said, no, we don't want that. It takes up too much space. None of us have room for it. We don't know when we're having kids. And if we did have kids, that's not even current safety regulations, mother. So off to the curb it went, and it was immediately snatched up. So I felt good that at least somebody wanted it. But if they do want it and they say, yes, please keep that for me. Well, what's the timeline and what's the plan for them retrieving it? You know, if it's not something that you actually attach a deadline to, you could end up having your house turn into a warehouse for other people's stuff. And then we're not only dealing with our own clutter, but we're dealing with multi-generational clutter. things that you've inherited and things that you're storing for your kids. Like, that isn't going to bring you to a place of freedom and lightness. This is going to be something that just keeps the burden kind of on your shoulders rather than shifting it back to them where it belongs. So ask them when they're coming for it. And we're going to get to this in a bit more detail in a moment. So another cartoon that I found that really spoke to this: one day, Cheryl, all of this will be yours. And what are we asking Cheryl? Cheryl, do you want any of this? Our kids are not collectors in the same way we were. They don't really value these things unless it's maybe just a sampling, just a few things that they want, a couple of the teacups from great grandma or a bit of the china. But having a separate set of good china or kitchen dishes isn't really something that our kids' generation really, has space or care about. They just live a lot more casually than maybe we did or our grandparents did. So now the other camp of people who hold on to things is like a pragmatic issue. They fear that they will go to look for it, that we'll need it, and then it's not there. So sometimes when we have items that we say we're going to need someday, we assign them an expiry date. Maybe it's based on the season. Like if you have seasonal things that are coming out now for the summer, by the end of the summer, if they haven't actually been used, that's a great time to take it as a cue to get rid of them. Same thing with clothing, that as we change seasons and we're culling out our clothing, we're weeding through those items of clothing, that's a great time to say, well, I don't actually need it. I didn't wear it. I haven't worn it for a couple of years. Let it go. And if by chance you get to a point where you regret having gotten rid of something, the truth is we all have a lot of means at our disposal. And there's lots of ways that you could replace that if you actually did need it. But I'm going to guess in most cases when people say, I might need that someday, they never actually use it. So the other thing I hear a lot of times is people who say, well, I spent good money on that, or it's an investment. So I see this in the same category as like a used car. If you had an old used car, a Toyota that had 250,000 kilometers on it, and you were thinking of getting rid of it, one of the things I remember my dad saying was like, well, that car doesn't owe me a cent. But in other words, you used it, you got all of the need, you got all of the use out of it, and that it paid for itself. And if you actually think about it, I'm going to specifically hone in on something like a dining room table, a dining room set. When you actually add up the number of times in a year that you use it, it's so small that the cost per use for those other expenses about housing it is really quite enormous. So we don't entertain big families very often anymore. A lot of times when we do entertain our family, it's at the kitchen table. So it's a little bit silly when you think of it, to have a kitchen where you sit and eat, and right over there, 10 feet away, is another eating area with kind of a more formal setting. So yes, I know that you've spent good money on it. Nobody's doubting that, but it's time to let it go, knowing that you got all the use out of it that you possibly could. So the bottom line with these excuses, these reasons, these stories that we tell ourselves is, are you getting more out of your possessions than it takes to warehouse them? And that's almost an item by item decision. Is it worth keeping, or can you let it go? And I have some suggestions coming up as to places that you can let it go to. Okay, so stay tuned. So how do we get going on this decluttering? Well, first of all, we are going to decide to do so. That deciding that enough is enough. Nothing more is coming in. I have to curb my buying or my garage sailing or whatever it is, and that we are going to decide that we have enough of everything, and then take it from there. So here are our 5 steps for busting clutter busting strategies towards the end goal of helping a home sale. Now, everybody, regardless of their immediate circumstance, will be in the position of selling a home at some point in the future. And the decluttering you do now is an investment in that future. I cannot emphasize highly enough starting early on this process, because the stress of moving on its own is enough, that you don't need to be going through all of the additional stress of having to purge and declutter and get rid of things. So let's start early. And when we are preparing to do battle, we call this the decluttering battle plan, because it starts with a strategy. It's not just, skirmishes, but it's a systematic plan. And what we're going to do is we're going to start strong. That's the first step. We're going to prepare to do battle by starting strong. And that means writing a date on the calendar where you are going to intentionally begin the process of decluttering. This gives you a bit of extra time to gather up your resources, some of your supplies. I've nicknamed them the weapons of warfare here, but also to give notice. Those people that I mentioned who are using your home to store their belongings, this is a great time to say, hey, we're going to be doing some decluttering. And by the end of the summer, I really need you to have your stuff out and accounted for, or give me permission and I will get rid of it. So starting strong means writing a date on the calendar. This helps to sidestep that kind of procrastination tendency that we have, that you have it on the calendar. And better yet, if you tell somebody that it's on the calendar. Maybe you're going to have a decluttering buddy, somebody who will help hold you accountable, and you're going to start. We're just almost towards the beginning of July 1st, so maybe this is a time when you can really buckle down and start on a plan to get going on this. So start strong, give notice, and gather supplies. This is all of the things that we are doing to prepare for battle. And what kinds of supplies am I talking about? Well, one of the things I love are the contractor garbage bags that you can get from Home Depot. They are extra large, they're puncture resistant, and they hold like probably 2 or 3 other garbage bags worth of things. So they are really great for getting rid of the odds and sods from the basement that another garbage bag wouldn't hold. The other thing I like is clear storage totes with lids, disposable boxes, masking tape, packing tape, permanent markers, and a utility knife. So the disposable boxes are going to come into one of our next steps, and I will tell you about that. But the other thing is that if you have all of your resources with you, you have all of your supplies, there's nothing standing in the way of you and your motivation. Because I'm going to tell you, it's so frustrating when you have a good intention to start a new project and you don't have the supplies you need. So you gather them all up, and then there's nothing that's going to frustrate you or reduce your efficiency. And I also want you to think about the outcome, preparing yourself for why you're doing this, that this is a really good cause for your own well-being, your emotional, physical, psychological, all of those kinds of well-beings are going to be benefited by this. So by visualizing the victory, it's going to help you keep going when we actually start. So as we get into step 2, I call this taking back the territory. And just like a battle plan, we are going to focus on the areas that need the most attention. But one of the things that people report is how overwhelming, like, how do I do this? Just like any project, like if it was getting into fitness or making a garden or creating some beautiful work of art or a craft, it takes time. And you cannot expect to sit down and just do it all at once. So we use a method called the Pomodoro method. And this is a proven strategy of focused attention for 25 minutes. So we literally set a timer for 25 minutes, and it helps us get started. Because just getting your body in motion and just getting going on this decluttering can play with our minds so much that by just getting into motion for 25 minutes, you're going to see that one or two decluttering sessions over the course of a couple of weeks, you're going to see a difference. And that is one of those positive feedback loops that keeps you motivated and keeps you going. So I have to tell you that I use the 25-minute method all the time, almost every day. I have a timer on my smartphone for 25 minutes, and I use it to help me overcome procrastination on tasks that I'm not a fan of. Things like paperwork or accounting or bills or anything to do with that kind of the side of my business that I don't enjoy as much. And we called this, when I was a school teacher, we called this chunking time, that if we could just allow for 25 minutes of undistracted focused work, you'll be amazed how much you can get done. And then we're also going to chunk territory. So rather than kind of flitting around and doing a bit here and a bit there, although that's better than nothing, I just have to say, we're going to start in the area that needs it the most, because our motivation is high. We are working for this limited amount of time, but we want to start where it needs the most of our attention. So a lot of people, that would be the basement, but it could be the craft room, it could be the garage. Like, we all have this one area that is really the most problematic. And we're going to get to the point, now it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be like about 80% done, because one of the things that we're going to realize is that decluttering isn't a once and done. We don't all of a sudden live in this beautiful, immaculately organized home and then it stays that way. And the decisions about things that we can't make at the moment, say we might have to park some things and come back to them and revisit them, because we all just have a limited capacity for making decisions. So along those lines, I have to just speak a word of caution to not get sucked into the time wasting activity of sorting papers. Papers are their own thing, and those can be done separately, but it doesn't really qualify as decluttering. And my idea that what you should do is just, make a stack and sit down, and maybe one of those 25-minute sessions is paper. But if you start on your basement and you run across boxes of bills, or the other big time sucker is photographs, don't get sidetracked by sorting through family photos. Just put them aside and do those as a separate item, okay? Because they will rob your time. You'll go down memory lane and never come back. And we don't want that for you. So make sure that you stick on to the 25-minute timer and stick in the area that needs it the most until you're about 80% done. Now, the other thing you might consider doing is calling in reinforcements. What do I mean by that? Well, we all need a helping hand sometimes. And throughout your life, I know that you have made lots of deposits into other people's lives, whether that was babysitting or house sitting or helping them with their tasks and things to do. Now, it is hard for some of us to ask for help, but this is the time to ask. And maybe it's a decluttering swap. Like, somehow your stuff, your junk isn't a problem for me to declutter like my junk is. So maybe it is literally inviting a friend over to help you with one or two of those 25-minute decluttering sessions, and just helping you get past the overwhelm. And then you can go back and do the same at their house. Or maybe it's inviting your family over to help with some of the moving of heavy items or boxes down from the attic, or whatever that looks like in your situation. And this doesn't have to be something that's really, arduous or onerous. It can be something that's fun. It can be a party in the sense that you can invite them over for tea and cookies and say, by the way, could you help me with a few boxes? The cost of your tea and cookie is a little bit of forced labor. But if you run out of options that way, or you just don't feel like that's something you want to do, there are other options that are not going to be voluntary. This is when we might end up asking people for help with the monetary incentive. What do I mean by that? Well, it could be that you want to sell some things online, let's just say, and you're not particularly techy, or you don't feel comfortable with that process. So there's a couple of options. Well, you could hire one of the people in your life who is younger and more tech savvy, and they can take a cut of the winnings, so to speak. Or maybe it's about organizing a garage sale and you need an extra set of hands to help you set up and supervise, and again, you're paying them a portion of the proceeds. The other thing, of course, is that there are a ton of companies out there that will actually organize online auctions for you. And the best part of that situation is that you're guaranteed success. Unlike your own garage sale or venturing into Facebook Marketplace to list things for sale, you know, this is a company, these companies will come and organize it for you entirely, or that you can just use them as a portal for your own photos and product information. So I've seen mixed results in all of these different situations. You know, like there's lots of people who have garage sale and they have unrealistic expectation about what they can ask for items, and then things don't sell. So you have to have a realistic expectation moving into these situations so that you're not left with things at the end. The whole idea of trying to sell something is a bit, you know, tough because there is so much out there for sale right now. So if you have gotten to the point where you are ready to get some help on board, you have put it on the calendar and that day has happened now, you've got all of your supplies, what do you actually do when you're standing in the basement? You're looking at the door and you don't know where to start. So this is where we get to the nuts and bolts. We've started rather high level, talking about clutter as an issue. We've talked about some of the strategies in a little bit more of a hands-on kind of feel, but now really let's get down to the nuts and bolts. How are we going to sort items so that it makes sense? Well, I love this as a starting place. This is starting with garbage. And I know none of you are living in garbage. I don't mean to imply that, but there are things that are of no use to us or to anyone else. We can't repurpose them. They don't have a resale value. And they really are probably just out to the trash, unfortunately. Now, we really do want to limit the number of items that we're putting into a landfill, but the sad fact is that we have things that do end up having to be there. And you have the list there of things: obsolete technology, baby gear. I say baby gear because most places won't accept older baby products because of safety concerns. Anything that is worn, broken, soiled, missing parts. And we have to make sure that when we are taking them for disposal, that they go into the right areas. Recycling wherever possible. Hazardous waste, electronic waste, all of these have special disposal at your local facility. And so make sure that you are sorting ahead of time so that you can get rid of them in a responsible fashion. So garbage. Now, the next category I love are donations. This to me is really a win-win situation, knowing that we all have far too much and that there are people who would really love what we have, but we want to make sure that when we donate to charities, thrift stores, charity white elephant sales or whatever, we can to support people and charitable endeavors, that they have good life in them, that they are in good repair. If they're missing a button, sew a button on it, for goodness sakes, or things that you have duplicates of. This is a wonderful way of getting rid of duplicates and anything that you haven't used in the last 12 months. So there's a lot of donation sites that in the GTA, places that will pick up things, not just furniture, but actually small housewares, things that you are finished using. And we have a good list here of different kinds of donatable items, even tools or hardware or those kinds of things can be donated and used. And don't forget, of course, about clothing. Clothing is probably one of the items that people cite most frequently as having too many of. So this is a great situation. It fills us with the win-win, and it gives us freedom to get rid of those things that we are holding on to just in case, knowing that somebody else will use them and love them and that we don't have to hang on. That's a wonderful suggestion for most of what you have that is surplus. So I totally can relate to this, that we have clothes that we own, clothes that we wear, and clothes that we are actually willing to donate. So yeah, it is an issue. Shoes, clothing, belts, accessories, costume jewelry, men's suits, shirts, ties, all of those kinds of things. We really need to be limiting the amount of those kinds of things that we keep, since we only really seem to wear about 20% of our closet, and the rest of it just seems to be hanging around in case we get back to that size, or in case we ever go on a fancy cruise again, or whatever it is. So let it go. You're going to be so grateful for the extra closet space. Now, this is one of the last categories here. And a lot of people have a desire to sell things because it overcomes that objection. They said, well, I paid good money for it. Well, there's a problem that a lot of times we overestimate the actual value, the actual resale value of those things, because let's face it, it's used stuff. So you might have paid a lot of money for something in the past, but that doesn't mean that it's worth that now. And I know that you really enjoy entertaining your family around the dining room table, and you have given it extra value because of the memories, but just looking at it through the cold, hard light of commerce, it's a used 25-year-old table. And that's what we really have to keep in the forefront of our mind. And there are a few exceptions, but for the most of the stuff that we have, it's not terribly valuable. So to just get a few bucks for it and have somebody take it away is kind of the win-win that we are searching for. If you have items that you think might be valuable, then it does pay you to go and get those appraised by somebody who's a specialist, and make sure that you're not inadvertently having a garage sale and selling some valuable heirloom by accident, like you see all the time on the Antiques Roadshow. So do a bit of due diligence, but also set your expectations realistically so that you can have it out of your house and a few extra bucks in your pocket. That to me is really the best outcome, the best case scenario. I've recently done some online selling for myself as I have been preparing to downsize. And I'm going to tell you, it is such a pain in the neck sometimes dealing with people who don't show up when they say they're going to show up. And they try to nickel and dime you, or they don't take proper measurements, and then they look at your new sofa and say, oh my goodness, that's not going to fit in my apartment after all. So you have to be prepared for a certain amount of aggravation when selling to the public. And I think that's why I think wherever possible to donate is a better idea. But at the end of all of this sorting of items, we are going to be left with a remnant that are the best of our things. the good towels, our favorite coffee mugs, the things that bring us joy to use, the things that we might have been keeping in reserve for, company or whatever. This is the time when we should be using that. It's more is not better. Better is better. So keep the best for yourself and get rid of the other things. And so we can look forward to having a smaller house, but bigger vacations. Keeping the things that really spark joy in us, as Marie Kondo says, and work towards eliminating the surplus. So when we think about the outcome, there are a lot of well-documented benefits to decluttering. And knowing that we have done something very valuable for our mental and physical health, there are even financial benefits by getting rid of those things for sale or bringing them to a consignment shop. Some of the charities that we donate to will issue you a tax credit for a donation in kind. So that might be a financial incentive. We also talked about the potential of downsizing your home, and that's the biggest bang for the buck. If you could declutter to the point where you could live in a smaller accommodations, oh my goodness, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars benefit. We also talk about the health benefits here, having decreased anxiety and stress and better quality sleep. We even know that a cluttered environment has been linked to depression and obesity. So the studies are there to tell us that when our environment is peaceful, we feel that in our minds, in our bodies as well. Also knowing that you have newfound space for other activities, that you can be in an environment that sparks your own creativity. So those are some less tangible, but nevertheless very important benefits to decluttering. So as we come to the end of our time today together, I just want to encourage you to sign up for our 30-day decluttering challenge. It helps you get started to have some accountability to yourself by sending an email. We will send you an email every day with a task and a tip. This is the first email as a sample. It's a truncated version. There's more to it, but it gives you some motivational tips and tricks to get going. And as you work your way through the 30 days, it just gets you on that road. It doesn't quite follow our advice to stick in the one area, but at least it's a way of getting yourself going, moving in the right direction. So this is almost like a game board, a calendar where you can keep track. The front hall closet is your first task. It's a 25-minute or so task that we're going to give you, so you can set your timer and follow the Pomodoro method and start disposing of things as you go. So we welcome your involvement in that by signing up online or by emailing us. You'll be receiving a copy of this presentation as part of our follow-up with you, and we will make sure that that you're kept in touch about our future events. So I wanted to thank you very much for being here tonight. It's been a real pleasure to share this with you. If you have questions, I encourage you to reach out to me by text or email, or you can unmute yourself and ask now if you'd like. So we are all over social media on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So whatever way that you consume social media, we are there, and I would encourage you to find me and friend me. I'd love to be your friend as well. Okay, so if you have questions, you can ask now, or we'll make sure that you have a way of following up with us later. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I'm very grateful for the time that you've spent with me tonight, and I look forward to reconnecting with you again in the future. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and happy summer. Bye for now.